Hello, friends. We welcome you to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in the tri-states regions of West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. And I'm Elliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. We are pleased to be joined by writer and poet Mary Imo-Stike today, who joins us and comes to us today from Scott Depot, West Virginia, via Rochester, New York, which is where she was born and raised. And after traveling after her college experience, she landed in Denver, Colorado. She spent 10 years there working as a rail worker and then a union plumber. The hills of West Virginia then called out to her, and she answered by moving to Charleston in 1987. She worked as a boilerplate operator there at a large chemical plant. She also had jobs as a training specialist and an environmental technician. She's also spent time at an oil and gas facility employed as a compliance officer. When she retired from work life, Mary went on to get her MFA in poetry from West Virginia Wesleyan College in 2015. Her poetry tells her story growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, reflecting on her childhood, family life, and stories, her debt to the legacy of her grandmother's attitudes towards work, and memories of some defining moments of those times, including the race riots of the 1960s and the Woodstock Festival. Her poems are inspired by seeing herself as a pioneer on the front lines of the second wave of the women's liberation movement by working at her non-traditional jobs. She is currently the poetry editor of Heartwood, the online literary magazine of West Virginia Wesleyan College, and Mary is also the co-creator of More Than Words, a monthly literary event featuring presentations by West Virginia writers in her community of residents. And Mary also shares quiet home life with her husband John and their much-loved canine Howie. And we're delighted to have poet and writer Mary Imo-Stike with us today here on Chapters. So Mary, welcome to Chapters. Good to see you.
Thank you, Elliot. It's good to be here.
I wanted to ask you, before we get into your poetry and your writing life, I found that in talking with you and doing some research on you, you had such a fascinating life before you got into writing poetry, and that was living in different, being from New York, living in Denver, then coming to West Virginia. You're a boilerplate operator, as we said, environmental technician. What got you into that line of work, and what got you interested in that line of work?
Well, and actually, I was writing all through that time, so it wasn't exactly before I started writing. But when I moved to Denver, I was in my 20s, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes when you leave home, you feel like you can do just about anything. And I had some friends who told me that the railroad was hiring. This was the Burlington Northern Railroad. And I thought, I was in my 20s, so I thought, sure, why not? And I went down and got a job as a track laborer. And it was really life-changing because I had never done manual labor before. And I found out that it was hard, but I could do it. And I actually liked it. I mean, there were things about it I didn't like, but that's what got me started on that route, I guess, of non-traditional jobs.
And how many years did you spend doing that kind of work before you moved to West Virginia and got into some other things?
I was in Denver for 10 years. So I did the railroad for a couple years, and then I got laid off. And so what I did was I started looking at other manual labor type jobs that I might be able to try that wouldn't have layoffs. And that's when I ran into the plumbing. And I took an apprenticeship. It took 4 years to become a journeyman plumber. And then, and there was a lot of work in Denver at that time because oil was booming. This was the early 80s. And so all the oil companies were building office space. So there was a lot of work going on in Denver. So I worked pretty steadily.
Very good. So you mentioned that you were writing all during this time. What was your writing life like with your work life? Did you find yourself having to get up early in the morning and write? Did you just write whenever you had free time? How did you mix it and balance it all at that time?
Well, it wasn't as structured as probably it is now. So it was just in my free time. In my free time.
Very good. And you always gravitated towards poetry or early on during that time?
Well, when I was in high school is when I started writing poetry and short stories. And then after high school, I just kind of latched onto poetry, and that's become my genre of choice.
So we mentioned that you got an MFA in poetry from West Virginia Wesleyan College in 2015. What made you decide to go that route, and why did you choose West Virginia Wesleyan, and what was that experience like for you going through an MFA program?
Well, I was working with Doug Van Gundy as what I called a poetry coach, and he and I were working. I would send him copies of my poems, and he would help me to revise them and give me a lot of guidance. And he became a professor at Wesleyan. And so he told me about the program. It's a low residency program. And since I was working, that was really the only way I could get an MFA. And so when I heard about it, I thought, well, let me try this. And I got accepted, to my surprise, and the rest is history.
So when we talk about low residency, what does that, because we hear that term a lot when we talk about MFA programs. What does that mean? What did that mean for you, and what does that mean generally when someone hears low residency MFA program?
Yeah. Well, the students go on campus only 2 times a year. And for Wesleyan, it was 8 to 10 days every time we went. So we went in the summer and the winter. And then the rest of the year, you send your work to your mentor via email or regular mail, but you have that guidance and connection with a mentor, and then you come back to the next residency in that winter or summer and go through 10 days of intensive classes. So it enables people who are working to get a degree.
Very good. Well, how do you feel like that experience helped you as a poet, going through that program and having that coaching and that collaboration back and forth with Doug and some of the other faculty there?
Yeah. Well, the faculty was wonderful, and the program itself is very supportive. I know you hear sometimes of MFAs where the students are hateful of one another and try to sabotage each other's work. And it wasn't like that at all at Wesleyan. It was very supportive. There's a whole community of students who supported each other, and the faculty, both, the visiting faculty and the permanent faculty, are very willing to work with you and help you out. So that made a world of difference, because it opened me up to things I had missed. I hadn't really studied the classics before, so I chose to do that. I chose to go back and look at Gerard Manley Hopkins and Shakespeare and poets from the past that I had kind of just skipped over because I was never challenged, to look at them. So.
Very good. So
Yeah.
it seems like a great experience overall.
It was. It really, and it continues to be, because I'm still very much in touch with that community.
That's great. Very good. Excellent. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you've had a lot of poems published in a lot of different places. I know one of the places, the Antietam Review, which is a widely respected literary magazine and literary journal. How do you go about finding places to get your work published? Is there places that you have in mind already, or do you get referrals from other writers? Where do you go? How do you find the places that you've submitted your work and had them published?
Yeah, I always look online, and there are several sites that list who's looking for work now and what the deadlines are, or contests. A lot of times there are contests, and that's how my chapbook got picked up for publication. It was part of a contest. I didn't win the contest, but they're also publishing several other collections. Even the people who didn't win the contest are getting published, so that was great. There's a couple different Facebook pages that list different contests, and also places that are looking for poetry to publish.
Very good. I want to ask you about one of your poems that I really like, and if we had more time, we'd talk about all of them, but there were 2 or 3 that really caught my attention that I really liked. Florence and Delia.
Yes.
Was one of your poems that I really liked, and I love the first 2 lines, because I read your poems first and then did a little digging with your help on your background, and I love how Florence and Delia opens up, because you write, "I am grown from women, grounded by work." Tell us a little bit about that poem. You write about Grandma Florence leaving the family farm. So much going on in that poem. But what's going on in that poem thematically, and what is the focus of Florence and Delia?
Yeah, and this is a good place to start. And I start my chapbook with Florence and Delia because when I write about all the different jobs that I've had and those unusual non-traditional jobs, they really started around the family dinner table when I would listen to my grandmothers talk, because they both were coming of age at the time of the First World War, and where they came to Rochester from their respective homes. And one thing that they did was they got jobs. And it helped me to see that, even in times of political upheaval, a woman's place is to get a job. And they obviously stopped working when they were raising their families. But for me, the lesson was their respect and their respective work. Mm-hmm. So.
And what's interesting about that too, because I know you talk about this in Florence and Delia, Addison, New York, in 1917. Now it's so different because women work, and a lot of two-parent homes have both parents working. But in that time, that women working in what we typically look at now as a typical work environment, structured schedule,
right,
wasn't as popular back then, or
right,
wasn't as widespread and known back then, and yet your grandmothers kind of broke the ceiling on that.
Right. It was unusual, but I think the timing had something to do with that, because the men were going off to fight in the war, and because I know my grandma Florence was in a munitions factory at one point in time, so that opportunity kind of opened things up for them too.
I love that poem because it really took us back into another time that
Yes.
still has some connections to the present. So I really love that
Yes.
poem. Another poem of yours that I really enjoyed was Boiling Point, 1964.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how one of the things I really like about all your poems is how you open up, because I get drawn in immediately. And in Boiling Point, you start out by talking about, at 14, I read Steinbeck, Salinger, John Knowles' A Separate Peace, searched graveyards for history, and started drinking coffee.
Right.
So sort of that coming of age moment in our lives where the teenager
Right.
takes over and we start pivoting away from being a child. So tell us a little bit about what the inspiration, some of the themes that come up in Boiling Point.
Well, it's interesting when you just read about, I was reading Steinbeck and A Separate Peace. It seemed like a lot of the novels that I was drawn to at that time, there were always stories of boys, doing great things, and that was always kind of frustrating to me. But that's kind of an aside, I guess. I remember very clearly that time when there was a race ride in Rochester. And it was almost like everyone was made aware of a world that is bigger than just the family. And I thought that was very striking and important for us. And like I end the poem, that was the summer we all came of age.
Mm-hmm. What was that like? Because I think we look back now at the '60s, and we watched that and the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War protests, but having that going on right in your community,
Mm-hmm.
where I think even people in Appalachia during that time had some of that, but we were watching it from afar on television in
Mm-hmm.
Alabama and other places. But it was in your neighborhood. What was that experience like? And what you mentioned, the dinner table earlier, a lot of conversations there. What were those conversations like with your family? What was that like, having that sort of going on right around you while you were trying to live and your family was trying to work and do all the things that normal families do?
It was in a way a solemn time. I think we weren't really sure what to think of it, because we didn't see ourselves as being racist, because we weren't. So we didn't know, like why this was happening. Why was this happening here? Was the big question. So it was a time of kind of soul searching for each of us, I think, in the family. And it wasn't exactly right in our neighborhood, but it was close enough that I could hear the sirens, and So it was very educational.
Yeah. Very, very, very interesting time to
Yeah,
time to be
very
a teenager.
interesting. And we didn't ignore it, but I don't think we always knew how to explain it.
And I love how you close out your poem, as you mentioned. In my hometown, the storm was rumbling up and down the streets, through our walls. We could not escape or hide our knowledge anymore. Our whole family came of age.
That's true.
So
Right.
that whole experience there. Another poem of yours I wanted to talk about, the hit songs of 1953. Tell us a little bit about that, and again, a great. You just open it up so well, and I'm right there where you talk about the back door, the wispy breezes. I mean,
Right.
I'm just right there at that experience. Tell us a little bit about that poem.
Well, I have a lot of wonderful memories of life on Linden Street. You know, when even before my sister was born, when I was probably 3 in that poem, and I imagined, you know, like what my mom would be doing all day, and even when I was taking a nap, I knew she would be there, you know, and the radio would be on, and I remember Arthur Godfrey, of course, was always on. But then she had those special songs that she liked, especially the Tennessee Waltz. And it was kind of a very secure time for me. And there was something about that strength that she exhibited by keeping things secure that has stayed with me. And to me, that's what I bring. That's what I bring to my family. You know, the sense of, you know, things are gonna go on no matter what happens.
Very good. And you kind of touched on my next question, which was, how did growing up with those strong women, those 2 grandmothers who were so strong,
Right.
mother who was a strong woman,
Right.
how's that influenced you, not only as a person but as a writer? How those experiences, how's that shaped you today, in terms of the way you write and the way you relate to family and others?
Yeah, it's so much a part of me, you know, and I think they were always very proud of me, but they were always kind of surprised at some of my choices. So, especially my mom, especially when I took up plumbing, you know, she was like, you know, what you're doing what? So, I guess how it affected my writing is it allowed me to be absolutely true to myself in my writing.
Yeah, very good. And really not be I would assume too, not be afraid of what you want to write about. Not
No.
going in with fear or, oh, is anybody going to read this, or can I communicate this way? You know, write this well.
No.
Just write what you want.
Right, because I knew it was my truth. Yeah, so no, yeah, I wasn't afraid.
So we have some exciting news to share. You have a chapbook
Yes.
of poems coming out very soon
Yes.
from Finishing Line Press. Tell us a little bit about that chapbook, how it sort of came together, and how you got linked up with Finishing Line Press.
Well, Finishing Line was having a contest, New Women's Voices, and I entered the contest. And like I said before, I didn't win the contest, but I won publishing rights. So I'm going to be published by them. And the chapbook, really, because it's my first one, it traces really the biography that you read. It's the story of my life, you know, including the non-traditional jobs, including the leaving Rochester and going to Colorado, and then coming to West Virginia. A strong part of it is the home that I find here in West Virginia now. So it kind of traces how I got where I am today.
Very good. How long did it take you to sort of get those poems collected and ready to submit? Were they poems that you had written over several years and collected, or did you sit down and know, I'm going to make a collection with these themes around these issues?
No, they were from several years, and they had been added to and revised while I was in the MFA program, and I needed help, I think, choosing how to juxtapose each poem, And then sometimes when you're entering contests, they have a limit on how many pages you can send. So maybe you would take a couple poems out and include others. So it's a labor of love, and it starts with my grandmother's. And the name of the collection is In and Out of the Horse Latitudes, which is kind of a strange name, I think, but it's based on a poem that I wrote about getting out of a bad relationship and accepting a new home, being in a relationship with a new home of West Virginia. So.
Well, we're certain, so congratulations on that. Very excited
Thank
for that, and
you.
excited for
Thank
that
you.
to come out, and we wish you all the best with that.
Thanks.
Something else you've been involved in addition to writing poetry, has been a new literary series that's been started in Putnam
Yes.
County in the Hurricane area,
Right.
and that is More Than Words. And I know you and another writer that we've had on our program, Kat Pleska, sort of started that up.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what that is and where the idea for all that came from.
Well, where the idea came from is Kat and I had gone to a writer's brunch, and we were just sitting around talking, and we realized that there are several activities and readings that go on in Charleston and several in Huntington. And it seemed like we were always going either one place or the other. And the way it started is we just said, why isn't there anything here? And the more we talked about it, we thought, well, why don't we try it? Why don't we see if we can get a schedule of people to come and read and see how it goes. So we started in January of this year, and with Mark Harshman, the poet laureate, who spoke, and it's been a success. So we're very happy.
And where is that held, and when is that held? If anybody in our audience would like to attend, when do you have it, and where is it located?
It's every second Tuesday of the month. So our next one is August 8th with Ace Bogus. It's at the Hidden Creek Mercantile Company, which is a fairly new place right on Main Street in Hurricane, and it's a beautiful venue. There's a mercantile store, and then upstairs there's a room called the Copper Room, and it's kind of like a banquet room, and that's where we have our reading. So we're up in the Copper Room, and we have a cash bar, and there's food available. So the time is from 6 to 7:30, so it's perfect for people who want to grab supper while they're there.
Okay, excellent, very good. So, and it's a great event. I've had the pleasure of attending, and you and Kat do a great job, and the folks at Hidden Creek Mercantile are very nice,
Yeah,
and
they're great.
It's a great place to have an event.
They're great.
So I encourage anyone that's looking for an opportunity to hear some excellent reading and to interact with some fellow writers to certainly attend that.
Right.
So what is Mary Imo-Stike working on now? Chapbook's coming out here very soon, and we've talked about some of the things that you've done in the past. So what are you working on currently?
Well, the preparation for this chapbook to come out has made me realize that I got to get ready for the next one. So that's what I'm doing. I'm starting to gather, and more thematically, I think, than just the manual part about grabbing this poem, grabbing that poem. I think I want to develop where I want to go thematically, and so that's kind of in the back of my mind of how to do that. And working on Heartwood has kept me busy also.
Mm-hmm, very good.
So.
Excellent. So in our final moments with you, Mary, if someone in our audience wants to get in contact with you, to talk to you about your poetry, to find out more information about your upcoming chapbook, how can they get in contact with you, and ultimately where will they be able to get copies of your chapbook of poems?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Mary Imo-Stike, and I always answer the private messages, so that would be a good way. The books will be available on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble, and I'm not sure about where they'll be locally, but I'm sure that as soon as it comes out, we'll have something at More Than Words, and maybe other readings.
Very good.
So that'll be made available.
Excellent, excellent. Mary Imo-Stike has been our guest here today on Chapters. We've been talking with her today about her fascinating work life, her fascinating writing life, and her upcoming chapbook of poetry coming up by Finishing Line Press, and also the More Than Words event that she and Kat Pleska help set up and run in Hurricane. And Mary, congratulations not only on the chapbook, but on all of your previous success with your poetry, and we certainly wish you all the best. And as you keep writing and keep getting published, we'll have you back on the program to talk about it. So thanks so much.
Thanks
you so
very much.
We also want to take a moment to say thanks to Chris Dargish and the staff and management of Empire Books and News for providing our on-site support and assistance today. We encourage you to come down to Empire Books and News. Many of the authors, publishers, and editors featured on our program have their works for sale right here at Empire Books and News, so you can talk to one of the members of the Empire Books and News staff, and they can get you taken care of. That's located right here at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. We appreciate all their support and assistance for each and every chapter's program. We also want to remind you that we have made it possible for you to reach out to the program through a variety of social media platforms. The first of those being email. Our email address is right here at the bottom of the screen. lp4@zoominternet.net is the email address. We do ask that if you send us an email, please let us know your name and the town or community that you're writing from so that we can keep track of that correspondence. And we do read and respond to as many of those email messages as we can, so please keep those comments and feedback coming. If you like to watch programs on YouTube and you're a YouTube user, we've made that available to you as well, and made the Chapters episodes available to you through that platform, and that address is right here at the bottom of the screen. Once you type that into your search browser, just click on the Chapters tab, and from there we've got all of our episodes archived and categorized for you right there on the YouTube page, and you can like and comment and share those YouTube episodes on whatever social media platform you prefer. And if you like Facebook, we even have a Chapters page on Facebook, and that email address is right here at the bottom of the screen. On the Facebook page, our more recent episodes are archived there for you to go back and take a look at, but you can like those, share those, and interact with viewers of the program through Facebook as well. So if you like Facebook, if you like YouTube, if you like email, whatever social media you are comfortable with and that you prefer, we have made it possible for you to stay in touch with the program through one of those social media platforms. And we know many of you have done that, and we appreciate those comments and the feedback so very much. So please keep it up. And that will do it for us this time on Chapters, but we invite you to come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.